Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed. This is your weekly recap for week 6 of 2026. Today, I am joined by the CEO of Essensys, James Lowery. James, how are you?
I am great, thank you. Pleasure to be here. I'm feeling slightly self-conscious today. I'm wearing glasses. As of yesterday, I now need reading glasses. So I'm doing the
Oh,
podcast with the glasses so I can read things and do what I need to do. And interestingly, it reminds me of my very first time on a video interview a few days after I'd arrived in MIPIM. I went to bed, I woke up in the morning, and both my eyes swelled up and I sort of had an allergic reaction. And it looked horrendous. So I sat on at the interview wearing shades in MIPIM. And so to put everything straight, that wasn't me trying to be cool in the moment. It was hiding swollen eyes, feeling flashbacks to my moment of wearing shades in MIPIM. So there we go. But I'm otherwise good. I'm great to be here.
you definitely look well. You don't look like you have swollen
Yeah.
eyes. And welcome, Be Speckled, James. Good to have you here, looking sharp. We have a fantastic newsletter this week, which was kindly and generously sponsored by Essensys. So appreciate you supporting us and making information and conversations and insights freely available to the co-working leadership all around the world. So we've got quite a bit to dig into, but before we do, you guys have been sharing a lot about this idea of invisible digital experiences. What do you mean by invisible digital experience?
Yeah, sure. Look, we've been thinking a lot about how we describe what we do, right? And we are a digital experience company, and that's really two parts. It's the Wi-Fi experience and the meeting room experience. If you have a great experience on Wi-Fi, you probably don't notice it. To deliver that forgotten about experience, you've got to work really, really, really hard. That's monitoring, automation, checks, proactive action. We've just started to dig a little bit more into what does it take to create that amazing experience, one that is ultimately invisible and forgettable. And actually, in many ways, it's a little bit depressing that we work really, really hard and we're very pleased when nobody notices it. But we are proud of that, right? And as a result, we've been, I think, just trying to articulate that a little bit better in the market.
Love that. And it always reminds me whenever I talk to people about how tech should work and how it should feel, it shouldn't be felt, it shouldn't be seen. I always think back to the Futurama episode. I'm not sure if you ever watched Futurama, but there was one episode where Bender turns around and he's like, how do you know if you've done anything? Well, nobody will know you've done anything at all. That is tech, right? If we do it right, nobody knows that we did anything. But if you don't do it right, everybody complains.
Exactly that. And actually, there are these moments of delight, right? There are moments when you do dip in and you do something, you think, amazing. And actually, a similar analogy or experience I've had. I remember when my first child was born, we bought a Dyson air purifier, right? And I was really excited about it, cool tech and quite innovative. And when I was doing my research, I remember one of the senior engineers said, the whole air purifier has been designed to be put in the corner and forgotten about. Right. And he's made with this really exciting piece of kit and I kind of want to play with it. And actually, I played with it and I found it fun. But then I had this reassurance that it was just in the corner and it just worked. Right. And every now and then I would check in and I would feel good. I would be comforted. I would trust it. But otherwise, I forgot about it. And that was the kind of moment I thought, I get this. I like it.
And it's a great analogy because clean air and good Wi-Fi are necessary, right? And both can be done. I mean, vast amounts of investment in technology and research went into making that thing that sits in your corner. And you forget that it's there. And sometimes you get upset because someone put a t-shirt over it and you're like, well, that is not a clothes hanger. That is the air purifier. It's doing something. Don't cover it. So to get this, we have a pretty in-depth newsletter. Me and you are both very technical people. So it's very likely we're going to both think of talking about or discuss some very tech-leaning stories this week. So for folks who are ready to join us on that journey, let's dive in. The first link that you and I found pretty interesting was a debate coming out of the multifamily industry, where we looked at a interesting observation and thought around a fallout between two new PropTech darlings in the PropTech world in multifamily. For folks who don't know what any of those 5 words mean, for a very long time, people building technology for residential buildings were saying that the incumbents were the ones keeping them out. They weren't sharing data, they weren't giving access, they weren't allowing integrations. And then the newcomers came, built these fantastic platforms, partnered together, and then they became big enough. And then they started not sharing data with each other. And so you got to the situation where people were like, well, especially the author was saying, it wasn't the old gods, the previous company's fault. It was just this is the way it works. And the only way to fix it is if the multifamily operators, the people running the buildings, came together to create this call for openness and interoperability. Now, I know this also caught your attention, James. What did you take away from this piece?
I like the conceptual point it makes, right? So the multifamily, I find the story fascinating, but actually what I took from it is, there are equal parallels in the world of co-working flexible workspace. This concept that it is a zero-sum game when it comes to the tech stack of a building, right? If you are a technology vendor, supplier, partner to that tech stack, everyone should play nicely together, right? What actually has happened in the past is that you find everyone slightly fighting against each other. And I love the point that true interoperability won't slice the pie smaller, it will make the pie bigger. That concept I truly, truly believe in. Something I see in the industry day to day, but also it's a journey that Essensys has been on, right? There's a point in time when we wanted to do it all, right? And did it okay. And that's kind of where we play in the experience space. And actually, if you're not comfortable and clear in that space, you then pick your partners, right? And actually, if you're trying to do everything, somebody who used to be a competitor now becomes a partner, right? And I do genuinely believe if you get 2, 3, 4, 5 companies coming together and aligning, and that they are broadly in kind of, in categories which complement rather than compete, that is a good thing for the industry, right? That is a good thing for the industry. And more importantly, it's a good thing for the PropTech industry, but it's a good thing for the end user, the landlord, the flex operator. I do think, to the point the article makes, there is a part to play for sure of the technology businesses, of course, right? There is equally a part to play of the buyers, the operators. And I see some people do it well. I see some people not do it quite as well. And the best are the ones. We have a landlord partner who does it really well. They have a big portfolio. That helps, right? Your voice is louder, I guess. But I've picked 5 partners, which probably delivers 80% of what they need across their portfolio. And they set a clear direction. And you can then work to that because you see the opportunity you're working at, you understand, what problems you're going to solve and what problems your partners are going to solve. And actually, what I really liked about kind of their particular approach, and actually there's parts of it in the article here, is that, it's not one person trying to do everything, right? Because that creates, I can't remember there's a sort of a brain rewiring point, right? You can get too with one company, and that can be commercially challenging and interesting. I love this point, culturally, kind of this brain rewiring, and it becomes very difficult to move your business away from it. And this partner that we work with, and I met with the CTO and perfectly articulated, I kind of want these 5 businesses, but also to deliver that, I want 5 businesses that all work together and are complementary. If one of them doesn't perform, I want to be able to switch it out. And that's fine, right? Because if you don't perform, you shouldn't be there, right? So that's kind of keeps everyone in their areas and focusing on. And then the second principle of what they were doing, if I want to buy a new building or sell one, be able to plug in my tech stack and deliver that quickly without hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of kind of, new hardware or whatever. So it's a software first, easily deployable. And by the way, if I sell the building, I unplug it and it's gone. I absolutely love that concept. And I love the points, it makes the examples on the App Store, right? The App Store opened up that world and created $1 billion+ industry in itself, which is making a much bigger pie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that idea of someone with a big enough portfolio being able to persuade vendors to work together. What about the 80-ish% of operators who are not that big? What can they do to get vendors to play nice together, because I am, from where I sit, seeing that we're leading towards tolling, we're leading towards API type price. These things are being discussed. Luckily, they're still in boardrooms and operators are putting their feet down. But what can operators do when it's working with your sales teams, with your partner sales teams, to make this clear that they want interoperability as part of the solution?
So the example I gave was, a single large landlord, right? That makes sense. But actually, and let's continue that, broaden it out more. Some of the other larger customers, the principles end up being the same, right? And actually, if you then take it across the entire industry, broadly speaking, the principles of what challenges you need to solve across your portfolio, they are the same, right? So actually, what you start seeing kind of more and more is the different levels of maturity and size have slightly different requirements, but I can sketch out the kind of look, Hector, you kind of more than I do, sketch out the handful of good options across each and every stage of your journey and category that you are trying to solve for. Now, I think the more that the larger end of the market aligns around that, and anyway, and I do like, it is good to be competitive, right? I like that point. It's absolutely a good point. And I don't think it's a good idea to have lots and lots of point solutions and you try and stitch those all together, because that becomes hectic, right? But I, 4 or 5 feels right, delivering a lot of the kind of the power that you need to do. And I think it starts to naturally align and happen, right? Because if you do it for the kind of larger operators, landlords, it's done. The work is done, right? And I think there's probably a flow through of the economics of it. I think there's an openness and kind of transparency, which helps everyone too, right? Again, if you're bigger, you can probably be a bit more open and a bit more confident about it. But we've got small customers who we have a great relationship with because we understand exactly what they're trying to achieve. The commercial opportunity might not be quite the same, but you know what? There's many more smaller players than there are bigger players. So if you can work well with every aspect of the industry, everyone wins, I think.
Well, it's really interesting observation, because it's also the larger operators are becoming like the force function. Like they're making everyone work together. They're ensuring that APIs are compatible. They're making sure that they have access to all of their data. And those just become standard terms for everybody else, because it doesn't make sense to have 30 different types of contracts or 30 different types of implementations when you've already built the expensive one. Eventually that will water down and kind of get to the off-the-shelf versions. So
Yeah.
completely accept that. And I love to hear that Essensys is playing so much nicer with other players. I remember coming into my role at Syncaroo where it was, oh, Essensys and Office R&D, or Essensys and they're like, but aren't they competitors? And I'm like, when was the last time you spoke to either, right? So it's great to see the shift that we keep hearing about in multifamily. I was in a call yesterday with some leaders and it was like, you realize that the co-working tech companies are innovating faster than any adjacent industry. The way we're collaborating, the way we're integrating, the way we're building data layers on top of each other isn't done in hotels, isn't done in airlines, isn't done in restaurants. They're all monolithic there. They're all kind of zero sum there. In
Yeah.
our industry, it's not zero sum. And we have this opportunity and we are doing it. There's a lot of great players making moves. And I'm glad to have a CEO of one of those companies chatting with me today.
Love it.
Cool. So let's dive a little bit into data, right? Co-working cafes shared their quarterly report from the US. In it, we saw that inventory across the US, at least over the 50 markets they were tracking, is up 5%, square footage up 4.7%, total number of spaces across those markets sitting at 8,854. So quite good to see markets up to the right? Even if it's a 5% increase, that is a fantastic growth number we want to see. And there's a lot of really interesting data points in there. What is the fastest growing city? It is Tampa, Florida, and Brooklyn, New York. I hosted a meetup here in New York last week, and I was like, who in the room is launching in Brooklyn or is in Brooklyn? And half the hands went up. Like Brooklyn is really hot. And so great to see that reflected in the numbers as well. But there was a lot of great insights hidden between the numbers. And before we hopped on the call, you mentioned you picked out some of those. What did you take away from this data drop?
Yeah, well, look, firstly, I love to see things are growing, right? And there's really healthy growth. And actually, some of the examples you gave there, Hector, you dig into the detail of it, there's really interesting nuances, right? Things that we all hear about and talk about, and trends that we've seen coming for years, quite honestly. But it's just nice to see some hard data behind it. The quote that I found interesting is the winners won't be the ones with the most pins on the map. They'll be the ones who can scale consistent occupancy and experience, right? And again, I think that's kind of a nice nuance to that. And I guess it plays to the perhaps slightly generic point of flight to quality as well, right? This is about, if you're going to do this, do it well. And I think the whole industry is becoming more sophisticated, more considered, more targeted in what it does. And actually, I see that across our customer base as well. The conversations that we have, if you're going to try and expand in your portfolio, why don't you grow your existing location? Working, it's tried and tested. Grow it, improve it. And we see that happening. Equally see some portfolio rationalization, right? If it's underperforming, and in the past that might have been okay, but I think the world is getting more competitive. So I can see that. And then we look at the newer locations. It seems like the sizes of locations are larger. That makes sense. It's being hyper focused on that location. It's a data-led approach to the location rather than I just like this location, like the building. Focus on experience, right? And if you're looking at a portfolio-led experience, the physical experience is absolutely critical. I always think about the word of co-working. The bar just keeps getting higher and higher and higher, right? There isn't a kind of, okay, location isn't important anymore. The physical, all of it's important, right? And again, this to me brings us back to some of the digital experience points, right? And a little bit as we started on the invisibility point. If you are creating a space today, if the digital experience is not right, your occupancy will not be there and you will suffer, right? I see bifurcation of the market, and the good ones, the good operators are getting better and better, and the ones who are not, suffering. We have been working really hard to make sure it just works, right? In the last year, we made some changes to the back end systems, really, how we deliver connectivity to the buildings. We had data centers, we closed those down. But in the process, we changed the way that we did the kind of provisioning of new sites and the way that we kind of set up and monitor. And we already have a lot of automation in the back end. We automated absolutely everything right now. So we are coming through that process right now. We are in a position where previously things that would take, maybe a couple of days for an engineer to look at and see, we have an AI-powered chatbot integrating all our back-end systems, which literally happens in seconds. At a click of a button, we're able to do a full health check of a portfolio, which probably would have taken us a week or two, right? And not only can you do a health check to see it's okay, you can keep running that and be more and more proactive about it, right? So if you think about sort of the invisibility point, you think about the importance of experience, and you think about it in really simple terms, these things just work, right? So easy to say that, but actually the reality is it doesn't always transpire. So I love this, it is not just the sort of scale wins at all costs. It's a more considered part of it. And actually, look, we have a similar focus on the meeting room experience, right? The really, really simple use cases that you can access a space when you want it. You can book it instantly, use that using a mobile phone, integrate with the systems. They're really simple things, actually. But to execute that well is not easy, right? And actually today, I think when you talk about digital experience, you don't compare the digital experience to the office experience of my previous office or the office experience 5 years ago. You compare it to going to a restaurant, to a gym, to whatever it might be, right? It's every kind of touch point in your life. And I think historically, the world of offices has lagged a bit because it sort of didn't need to. But to your earlier point around the innovation and the pace of innovation, I think it's rapidly catching up and there's some really exciting things happening.
Yeah, I would like focus on it's not just growing, it's getting more mature, it's getting more sophisticated, and it's getting more automated and integrated. I also posted a link from a piece that we put out sharing one of the frameworks that we always tell operators to use. And it just goes to highlight the fact that it's great when it all works, but you can do small tasks to make sure it's always working. We share this idea of red, yellow, green testing. So the simplest thing for an operator is like, okay, I've connected my system to be able to take bookings externally. When was the last time you used it? And when you used it, what were you looking for? Right? Whether it's e-commerce, aggregator, broker, tap to pay, whatever it is, don't just test that it works. Try to break it. And this is I've explained this in so many calls over at my day job at Sinkaroo, where I was like, what do you mean you've set it up and it's working? Like, have you tested it? Why do you want to test for failure? They always ask. If you don't test the edge cases, then it causes such a disruption to that seamless experience that you want to provide. It becomes your fault. You didn't test for that edge case. And so definitely go have a look at that piece as well. It's just an interesting, really subtle way. And then when you get more sophisticated, you will have AI agents who will do these testings across all your integrations, or you'll have a team or an integration partner who will do them for you. That is just a very good step. And if you feel everyone is getting so sophisticated without you and you're like, oh, I have integrations, but I've never tested them, this is a good place to start. Go test for failure, force failure, and see what happens so that you can know how to improve your systems.
And I love the term in that article, Hector, of set and forget. I've seen that through the industry from my old world in commercial real estate, and then transitioning to the world of technology. That if you are a real estate owner, developer, the concept, you have a building, it takes you 5 years to build that building perhaps, and you build it and then you've built it, and then the job's done and you move on and other things happen inside it, and that's fine. That's not the case with technology, right? So your point around A, you test the edge cases, I love it. And B, you keep testing it because things change, things change, things evolve, and you've got to keep constantly on top of that. So very, very supportive of your theory there.
So I'm going to dive into one more piece, just cognizant of everyone's time this week, letting them get back to their Friday and hopefully their weekend as soon as they can. There was a great piece from Graham over at Baseworks looking at, does it actually matter who is paying for the membership? And it's a really good just reminder to operators that you serve different markets. Even though two people may have similar roles, how they pay is a different type of positioning. And it's also a different type of offering and expectation from the person who's actually swiping the card. It's a really interesting reminder. Obviously, if the corporate company is paying for it, how have they found you? How are they booking it? Is it centralized? Is it not centralized? Is it credits? Is it reimbursement? All of that is one conversation, but also, are you checking the boxes that the corporation needs to keep paying you? And then if it's directly, that experience has to be perfect, right? If I'm swiping my personal card and then being reimbursed by my employer, the risk's on me, right? If I go there and the Wi-Fi is choppy or the upgraded thing doesn't do this, all of these things affect the procedure, but also affect how they perceive the space. And it also goes back to we've been saying this whole call is it all comes down to that experience, right? Two people need the same experience, but they need it in different ways. And you have to be able to accommodate those different types of users.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's a great article, and I love the clarity of that distinction, right? There are two very distinct use cases, large company, individual user. They both want a good experience, as you point out, but actually their needs are very different, right? And actually, this plays to me to this point around just the understanding your customer, right? It's the bigger concept here. Who's using your space? How are they using their space? Are they getting what they need from it? And I love this idea of, if you think about workspace today, you either, you're buying a desk, you're buying a room. And I think what we're seeing now with the sort of, a greater focus on, as I said, the bar's getting higher, right? There's a greater focus on being the best and what that means. If you want to be the best, you've got to understand your customer, take a data-led approach to that. And I think when you think about workspace, if you can shift that conversation away from just being, I'm supplying you an office, a space to work in, to I'm ultimately making your business more productive, right? And that's a big shift, right? And I don't think I think it's an easy thing to say. I think it's a very complicated thing to deliver on. And I love that conversation, and I'm passionate about the industry heading in that direction. And some are doing some really interesting things about understanding what does that mean. And, if at the end of the day, you can have a conversation with one of your, an end user, a company or an individual or a company within your space and say, here's how you use this space. And this is what it meant for you. And actually, here's how we think we could use it better, right? And to do that, it's understand your customer, right? Who's buying it? What is their use case? What do we need to communicate to the company, the HQ? What's good for them? And understanding all of the subtle patterns around it, but also delivering that in a digestible way, right? The last couple of years, we've been supplying data, and some of our very sophisticated customers do lots of very cool things with it. Others, I think, again, sophisticated operators, but perhaps don't have the resources to have a team behind that, right? So what I think is important is, what do you do with this information, right? You can get so much data these days, but what is it telling you? What does it mean? And trying to boil it all down. I'm having a conversation. It's a renewal conversation, which is this kind of, partly getting at. How do I demonstrate something different to that group of people, which makes me think, my working pattern for the week, it's 3 days a week. Oh, I'm actually doing 2. And oh gosh, I use the shared space a lot. But maybe I can have a little bit less space. You're going to save me money. I probably won't mind paying a little bit more money for that. If you're going to save me money and I'm going to have a better experience because I know exactly, you give me more meeting room credits, whatever you might do, that's a really sophisticated conversation. And I love that. I think it's just kind of scratching at that point. I think it's making a very clear point, and I love it. And I hope more and more conversations come around that topic, because the better we take a data-led approach to understanding our customers, that bar gets higher, and people, I think, will really start to move the needle in terms of what does workplace experience and productivity look like.
Absolutely agree. And it's actually one of the biggest agreeable moments we had at the last co-working leaders coffee, where we all kind of agreed that we're no longer selling a product or a service, but outcomes.
Yeah.
That is, once you shift that mindset that you're selling the outcome, not how they use a space or what they use in the space or how much of the space, that's when you get to that sophisticated level of being able to leverage data to structure deals that make the most sense, regardless of who's paying. And I think that is exactly what we both agree on. So, James, I'm going to thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your insights, for hopping out of a train so quickly to join us for this call, and for sharing us your brand new glasses. We will see you again soon. Thank you again for joining us and for all the support.
And thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your newsletter and a great discussion. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.